Hello everybody and welcome to VFR. Today we are here on Long Island at Long Island MacArthur Airport, KISP. And today we are going to be taking a trip around the Big Apple in our new Beechcraft Staggerwing. That's right, we're talking about why you should fly the Beechcraft Staggerwing, one of the cooler little biplanes I think I've seen in the sim to date. So I've really been liking this airplane. It's a lot of fun to fly. And yeah, so we're going to take a quick sightseeing trip, basically flying from Long Island up around to the Hudson River, flying that Hudson River VFR corridor down past the New York skyline, and then coming back here to land it up. So we're going to hop in, fire this thing up, taxi on out to the runway, and we'll talk through what we're going to be doing today. So we're here holding short of runway 6, getting ready to go. Now, the Beechcraft Staggerwing, as you can see, is a fairly straightforward airplane. It was developed in the early 1930s, introduced in 1933, and designed and marketed as an airplane for business executives. Designed by Walter Beech, the namesake of the Beech Aircraft Company, which will become Beechcraft. So this is the Beechcraft Model 17 Staggerwing. Again, it was Beechcraft's first airplane. Had a good top speed of 212 miles per hour, 184 knots, cruising at 176 knots, which is quite spry for its time. I mean, if you've flown the JU-52, another kind of Asobo Legends airplane, that cruises significantly slower. So this is a hot rod in its day. 670 nautical miles of range and a 25,000 foot service ceiling. You've got a big radial engine up front by Pratt & Whitney. And this airplane found its fame in a lot of different niches. It was a popular business travel airplane, roomy for the time, comfortable. You also have air racers who really took to it. So this was a big air racing airplane, especially in the 30s. Pre-war, won the 1936 Bendix Trophy, piloted by Louise Thaden and Blanche Noyes in a 14-hour, 55-minute flight between New York and Los Angeles. So, again, a lot of air racing pedigree, fast airplane, sleek airplane, and it really is kind of the iconic, and a pretty iconic Art Deco type aesthetic that is, that just screams the golden age of aviation, especially propeller aviation. It looks really good, and it gets a very unique design. So, you have this negative staggered wing. Now, tangibly, it improves pilot visibility. If we get in here, and other biplanes, if you look up, you've got a big wing over your head and over this side too. In this airplane, you actually have very good visibility relative to other airplanes like it. There are other effects, aerodynamic effects, that are, let's say, touted, but there's debate as to whether or not any have really been realized. That would be reducing interference drag, among other things, with the wing. Another notable feature of the design of this airplane, big, beefy landing gear here. So that's actually pretty unique on airplanes like this. You start to see it, again, more with the monoplanes of this era, and a little bit later, really. So this is pretty cutting edge, big landing gear system, which is unique for a biplane of this type in this category. So we're going to taxi on out. It is a fun plane. It is a tail dragger, but startup is blisteringly simple. Prop full forward, mixture full rich, open the throttle a little bit, and then master switch, and you can prime it if you want, fuel pump on, and you hit the starter, or turn your magnetos on, obviously. But so it really isn't anything crazy. The panel is very simple. It's a really a hand flyer's airplane. So we're going to come out here, taxi on out, put on the brakes, and so essentially, again, we're going to try and keep it. This thing will fly at 60 knots. We're just going to go full power. I don't have any flaps in or anything. And we're just going to try and keep it on center line. Now, this is a tail dragger, which means that once the tail wheel starts to come up, it will want to jerk off into the other directions. So you got to be careful to avoid your ground loops. And that wasn't a great takeoff, but it will work. Gear can come up. You get a nice clunk. And it brings us to another fun thing, which the sounds in this airplane are really good. So this airplane was developed by Carenado for the Asobo Famous Flyers series. I believe it's the first airplane in this series. So it is a pretty cool piece of aviation history. And it's good fun. So again, it's a little squirrely on takeoff, like big old tail draggers tend to be. And that adds a little bit of fun to it. So we're going to climb on up here and head off to the north. Basically over the Long Island Sound, over a little bit of Connecticut before we turn west and intercept the Hudson River. All right, so we are level here at about 5,000 feet, heading out to the north. And essentially all I've done is pulled the power back setting 35 inches of manifold pressure, and just putting our prop RPM around 2100 RPM in the green arc here. Again, you can play with different cruise configurations, but that's what I'm setting for now. So this is a very fun, simple plane. I mean, obviously you have some interesting features in the cockpit. These steel bars it is nicely positioned to get in the way of your airspeed indicator, so you do have to lean around a little bit. So having a way to move your seat position is helpful in this airplane. But it is very fun, and it's a very bare bones, everything is very straightforward. You have attitude indicator, your airspeed, your altimeter, your vertical speed indicator. You've got a couple compasses that you can use. You do have the ability to track VORs, so we have a radio system here. This is just the default Bendix radio system. And then you have you can track your VORs here, all your engine management stuff over here, and then basically all of your engine controls and switches and lights are down here. As you probably saw when we were pulling up, the tail lights pop in and out. They retract, which is always cool. It's like pop-up headlights for an airplane. But on a little airplane, so it's even cooler than on a big airplane. So again, really cool, and it's a really nice model. Looks really cool, and it does feel very, very vintage. And even though you've got this big bar in front of you, I feel like a very pleasing panel, let's say. It's pretty simple. It's not very fussy. And if you want to do one thing you can do with this, it's really ideal for, because you don't have a lot of crutches to lean on. Cross-country, dead reckoning navigation, old school, really old school navigation. We're not even talking DC6. This makes the DC6 look very tricked out, because I don't even know how far these radios are. I don't have any way to measure my distance to our VOR stations. So, it's an interesting airplane if you want to really do that old school kind of stopwatch and navigation over a long distance. But it is definitely very much a hands-on airplane. There's no autopilot, so if you need an autopilot, that's not something that is in this plane. So, I don't know how many really long trips you'll go on, but it does just take a few constant trim adjustments to stay at altitude, which, from everything that I've read, seems fairly realistic about the actual airplane. We got a little bit of a wind gust here. And you see we're doing pretty good. We've got about 200 miles per hour, which again is a decent pace for an airplane like this. So right now, we have the Carmel VOR tuned in on 116.6, and we're basically just going to track that inbound, the 336 radial inbound to that VOR. We're going to, once we get close to there, we're going to turn around and basically fly west until we hit the Hudson River. You can't miss it. It's a big river. At that point, we'll descend down to 2,000 feet to get under the New York class Bravo shelf, which starts at, I think, 3,000 out there. And once we're down that way, we'll start talking through the actual entering the New York Special Flight Rules area, which is basically a VFR corridor up the Hudson that we will fly. And we'll do a little loop over the Statue of Liberty and then come on back. All right, welcome back. So we're now still tracking north-northwest. This lake here in front of us is very close to the to our VOR, the Carmel VOR. So essentially what we can do, at this point I know we're really pretty clear of the New York Bravo, and we're not on any ATC or anything, so this is purely a thought exercise. But we can go ahead and turn left, because we see that right over there is the Hudson River. I've flown this before, so I do know that that's the Hudson River. The VOR station would go out a few more miles that way and then turn in. But for now, if we just keep it basically anything north of just due west, we should be just fine. And then we'll descend down to 2,000 feet as we get closer to the river, so that once we're hitting that, we're below the Class Bravo shelf at New York. And I'll try and put up all of these different airspaces in post, if I remember. So once we get to the Hudson River, we're going to be flying into the New York Special Flight Rules Area, SFRA. Essentially, it is a VFR corridor about the width of the Hudson River that follows it all the way down and through past New York for VFR traffic. Essentially, it flies under the Class Bravo airspace, or you could go over it. So basically between 13,000 and the surface, or 7,000 feet and above are your options. And I'm getting a little low. So southbound traffic, which we're going to be southbound, flies along the right bank of the river, and northbound traffic flies along the left bank from our perspective. So we're going to be flying down the west bank, and then if we were going back the other way, we'd fly up to the east bank. Now, if you're going all the way through, they suggest you stay at an altitude of 1,000 feet or higher. If you're going to stop somewhere along your route, then you go below 1,000 feet. So we're going to be stopping at the Statue of Liberty, but we'll keep 1,000. We'll keep it around, I like to keep it around 1,100, because I find this airplane, it's easy to keep it between 200 feet. So you can keep it at an altitude plus or minus 100 feet. But much more precise is a little tricky without an autopilot. So that's what we're going to be doing. And again, with the chart, I'll pull up the chart and show you. There are a few visual reporting points that we will go through as we go in there. But we'll cover that as we turn on to the Hudson. So you see the river out in front of us now. That is what we're basically going to follow down past New York City. All right, so we're out of the Hudson now, and we're going to stick to the right side of the river because we drive on the right here in the States. So we're going to fly down this way. We're at about 2,000 feet. Again, once we pass this bridge, we'll go down to our VFR cruising altitude into New York of about 1,100 feet. Again, we'll try to keep that plus or minus 100 feet. But yeah, we're out over the Hudson now, and then the first visual reporting point we're looking for is the Alpine Tower, which is just outside of the Special Flight Rules area, and should be on our side of the bank. I haven't been able to see it in Flight Sim, but we'll see. All right, so we are now in the SFRA. So we would make some kind of radio call at this point to say, basically we're on the river and heading southbound. We just passed the Alpha Tower, or Alpine Tower, I should say. Hudson River traffic, yellow Staggerwing, southbound on the river, 1,100, just past Alpine Tower. And again, I have never flown this in real life. I've only watched videos of other people doing it. But that's a rough idea of what you're doing. You're cruising here kind of low, 1,100 feet. Relatively high terrain off to our right. I mean, you don't think of New York as being this place with big hills, but it is. And so it's just an interesting little cruise if you want to be pseudo-realistic. Our next reporting point is the George Washington Bridge out in front of us. It's going to be a bit of a hulking mass there. Hudson River traffic, yellow Beechcraft Staggerwing, passing George Washington Bridge, 1,100. All right, so we're past George Washington Bridge again. We're just staying on the right bank of this and just trying to keep air altitude between 1,000 and 1,200 feet, more or less. And as you can see, New York has sprung up out in front of us. So that is Manhattan. And you'll see the One World Trade Center and Empire State Building off to our left. And you have New Jersey off to our right. Our next reporting point is the Intrepid aircraft carrier. That's now a museum. So it's got a bunch of airplanes on the deck and a little closed area too. So you can actually pick it out here. It's not custom modeled in, but you can pick it out from the photogrammetry. And the Staggerwing is really fun for this. You do really appreciate the visibility a little bit better, especially the forward visibility. If you can bump yourself up in your seat a little bit, it does help. But yeah, it's a fun, cool airplane to do this cruise on. I don't know why. It's just the kind of mix of being an old school prop biplane, but also being fast enough to make a trip like this, which is, you know, about an hour of flying 100 or something nautical miles. Well worth it. So now we can really see the skyline start to come in, and again, looks pretty good. You can see Central Park off to our left, the big tree area in the center of the city. As we fly up the river. But yeah, something about the Staggerwing and just the kind of low slung cockpit. It looks almost like a race car cockpit with big wings on it. So it is a really cool looking airplane for a trip like this. And if you see that weird one, not the cruise ship, but the one past it, I believe is the Intrepid. So that was an aircraft carrier that has been docked in New York and turned into a museum. Really cool if you ever find yourself in the city. Hudson River traffic, yellow Staggerwing, passing Intrepid, 1,100. So you do get great views of the city. So again, if you're looking for some fun VFR corridors and special areas to fly in, this is a fun, realistic one that you can do. I mean, you can do this in real life if you have a pilot's license in a plane. And in the real world, this would be very busy. You'd probably be a lot of helicopters, a lot of other small airplanes around us. So you'd be constantly listening and looking out for traffic all around you. Might be a cool idea for an event if someone wanted to do that. A VFR flyby of the New York skyline. One World Trade Center off to our left. And, yeah, Manhattan. And for us, that is called out on the chart, so we could report that if we needed to. I think the next one is Clock, which is coming up right basically past that. You can see the ventilation towers for the tunnel running under the Hudson. At this point, we're still more or less at 1,200 feet. Hudson River traffic, yellow Staggerwing passing Clock, 1,100. So hold there, and yeah, just off our nose you got, well, so off our left you have New York, New York, and all of the associated boroughs. On our right, we have New Jersey. Newark Airport is not far from here, off in that direction. And then off our nose, we do have the Statue of Liberty. So we are going to stay, below the shelf here, about 1,000 feet. But I'm actually going to start, and we're going to do a lower flyby. So no one else is out here, but we could say something like river traffic, yellow Staggerwing descending 600 feet. Going to circle the Statue of Liberty. And it looks like we're coming in clockwise. I think you're supposed to do it counterclockwise. But so there's a distinct way you're supposed to do this. But it is a really cool view. So that is Statue of Liberty. If you had some passengers, you could take pictures. You got a few little boats out in the water, some buoys. It is, well, nicely modeled. It's a really cool one. All right, so we're now heading out to our final reporting point on this, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, or I certainly didn't say that in New Yorker. But basically, this is reporting point VZ in the SFRA. Out beyond us is basically the ocean. So we're going to basically, once we get out of here, fly out a little ways until we're clear of the outer edges of this these islands here, and then we'll turn back north and fly up Long Island until we get back to Long Island Airport. Hudson River traffic, yellow Staggerwing passing the Z1100. We're going to depart out to the south, fly up Long Island. All right, so I'm going to make a left-hand turn and clear ourselves into the Kennedy Bravo. So JFK Airport is right off of our left, out here along the beaches. And we're going to cruise at about 2,000 feet, just up the beach. And if we get Kennedy in the shot, we might. It's just past here. So an airport we've flown into before on the channel, an area we've flown a little bit. So we're going to just fly up this way and head back towards where we started, Long Island Airport. So we're flying up Long Island. Now, what do you need to know to fly the Beechcraft Staggerwing? Well, number one, you have good capacity, 3 passengers, 125 pounds of baggage, and you can really load up all. I took full fuel. I think you should usually take full fuel if you can. Its fuel tanks are a little bit, maybe complicated is the wrong word, but a little complicated. Basically, you have 5 different fuel tanks. None of them are particularly big. You have a main tank, which is generally used for takeoffs because it has the most fuel flow. I don't know if that's technically modeled in this airplane, but real world, you generally use the mains for takeoff and then switch to the auxes for cruise. So we have one main tank. If you look at these 2 dials, these are your fuel dials. Your main tank here, 29 gallons, and then you have a left lower, you have an LL, an RL, an RU, and an LU. So those are your 4 aux tanks. I believe they all hold 23 gallons of fuel. So in a cruise like this, you will run out of 23 gallons of fuel. So you need to be changing those fairly constantly. Now, it's again, it's pretty intuitive. If you want to use your main tank, you flip it to main here. If you want to use your LU, you flip it there. If you want to go off to one of the fuel tanks on the bottom, you turn it to the down position and then you choose it here. But again, if you find yourself in this airplane and the engine just cuts off for seemingly no reason, change your fuel, because that's what's probably causing that. So you do have to keep an eye on that, and there's not really a great way, as far as I can tell, to tell what is in each tank. So if that is in the cockpit, I have missed it. But yeah, so fuel management is important. It's important to keep your eye on that while you're doing it. We'll talk a little bit more about landing when we get there, but it is not, I've found, the easiest airplane to land gracefully. You can get on the ground just fine, but gracefully, I mean, it's hard to do this without a little bit of a bump. I mean, so it's your usual tail dragger landing stuff. I find that if you approach it between 70 and 80 knots, you're going to keep the power on really until the end. And then once you're really down there, you just kind of kiss the wheels to the ground as lightly as possible, and then you let it just loop bleed energy from there. You can really ride the stall horn, though. It'll go down to 60 miles an hour and fly, so it's really, but you might, if you're going faster, you might float a little bit. So it's worth playing around with. I think it is kind of fun to play around with, but it is interesting. Something you'll have to work with. Gear and flaps and landing lights, anything that can be extended. This extension speed is 110 miles an hour, so we need to get below 110 miles an hour before we put anything in. Again, it's not, I don't think damage is modeled in this particular model, but if you're flying the airplane, that's the limit for that. The last thing that you need to know about flying this airplane is it's pretty hands-on, so it's not an airplane you're going to set and forget. I mean, you can trim it out just fine. I have it on a trim wheel right now, and it's very responsive, but it does take some constant adjustments. Because you have all these different fuel tanks moving fuel between different parts of the airplane, so getting off balance left, right, if you're not tracking that, is easy to do, and you'll have to put in some left stick and right stick. And again, you're constantly trimming it out. And as far as I can tell from my limited internettings of this airplane, that is realistic to the real airplane. So, I mean, I think that's a feature of the airplane itself. But something to keep in mind, if you're looking for a hands-off cruiser, this one probably is not that one. But it is good fun. And again, I think it's not super heavy management, engine management or anything like that. You set your power levers, you can adjust your mixture and prop stuff, and it'll give you different performance. But again, it's not rocket science. The fuel system is, again, there's a lot of tanks. I suggest filling them all up and just using them all as you kind of remember. But yeah, other things, the windows roll down, which is kind of cool. You get that nice engine sound, a little bit louder. This one does too. So if you want a little bit more of an open top biplane experience, you can roll the windows down. All right, so we're going to fly up this beach a little bit. The next bridge we see between these two different islands, we'll take a left and turn heading 048 and head towards Long Island Airport. Weather at Long Island, we're in live weather today. We got altimeter 3019, which I believe we have programmed in. 10 miles or more visibility is good. 1.1 degrees C, 34 Fahrenheit, and the wind is calm. Looks like wind is calm, although I'm not feeling that right now. It's been a little bit bumpy on this flight. So, other airplanes like this that you might be interested. We have the Carenado Waco, is another pay-wear airplane by Carenado. I think it's a little bit more expensive than this. That's an open-top biplane. It's not quite the same. It's really not as much of a cruiser. It's more of a traditional biplane. But that's another fun airplane if you're looking for something of this period and something similar in terms of biplaning. If you're dead set on a default biplane, the Pitt Special, we have a couple versions if you have the Reno Air Races pack, but the Pitt Special is the kind of default biplane. It's a little bit smaller, more air race and aerobatic focused. But now other airplanes like it, the Beechcraft Bonanza is another airplane that we have, and we've talked about incidentally as being basically the genesis of the King Air. So if you wanted to fly the Beechcraft line, you could go to the Beechcraft Bonanza, which is the airplane that replaced this in the late 40s, early 50s. So basically, they stopped making Staggerwings and started making Bonanzas. And then Warbirds too. It feels a little bit like a kind of tamer Warbird, like a T6. Even your P40s and your P51s are basically high performance, but versions of this kind of. They follow a lot of the same design ethos. So it's a very similar vintage, same aircraft industry that made all those airplanes, made this one. So it's all that is, you can kind of see the similarities. And if you're interested in that, Warbirds would also be something that can cruise fast, probably not as comfortable or civilian focused, but similar vintage, similar kind of aesthetic, at least in terms of internally. All right, so we are crossing over what should be the bridge here. Yep, right off our nose. So we're going to turn left 048, and we should see the airport at any point now. All right, so Long Island Airport, just off our nose here. We're going to just make straight in for runway 06, since the world is our sandbox at the moment, and winds are allegedly calm. So we're going to bring the power back. We're down to 120 knots, so you're going to have to bleed a lot of power, bleed a lot of speed off to get down to 110 knots, where we can start to deploy gear and flaps and stuff, which will make it easier to stay at that speed. So gear down, and you have this little light on the center panel, should light up green when it's down. Flaps. So we got the green light on the gear. We'll put the first notch of flaps in. And there's the runway. Now, it's still feeling a little bumpy, so we may end up in a crosswind landing here. I'm not sure what it is in sim. But runway 6 is just off our nose. So we're coming in around 90 knots, and whew, that is quite a Coming in around 90 knots, and this is going to be the embarrassing part of the day when I skip and hop down the runway, but that's all right. So let's just put it on the runway. Again, we're going to try to approach between 70 and 80 knots, as I find works best, but you could do whatever you need to. And then once we're down, we can put the once we're getting a little closer, we'll put the flaps all the way down. Now, I do find that you kind of have to guesstimate where the speed is and just assume that you may have to bounce back and forth or go a little bit lower to get that bar out of the way. It just, in this situation, it helps quite a lot to be able to move around your head view position in this airplane. So it's showing we're pretty fast. So that's okay. Let's give it the rest of the flaps. We're a bit high and a bit bumpy, but that's all right. Looking pretty good now. Keeping it around 80 knots. We'll keep some power in basically till the wheels hit the ground. And again, we want to be slightly, we want the nose pointing in the air slightly. So we're not going to come in perfectly level, but the front wheels are going to touch. And we just kind of want to touch with a slight flare. Now we're getting slow. And it's looking okay. So give it some power. Here's where the speed needle disappears a little bit from you. But again, it's kind of an interesting... Yeah, maybe interesting challenge isn't the right word, but it's unique, it's quirky. And I like a good quirky plane. Alright, so this is looking pretty good. And again, we're just going to get down and flare and hold the flare until it falls out of the sky is the idea. But so we'll come on out of the power. It's looking good. It's feeling good. We're getting stall horn. That's not a huge shock. You can really ride the stall horn if you are there. And there's the first landing. And there's the second. So welcome everybody to Long Island. We made it, and I missed my taxiway. I did, so we'll back taxi a little bit. All right, so that was not too shabby. Good fun flight around New York, and again, I think the Staggerwing, just the aesthetics of it, and it's a unique, fun plane that you can fly. Really simple controls, but it's also, again, it's another airplane that's kind of challenging to fly well. That was probably the best landing that I've done in the Staggerwing ever. So again, there's some stuff to think about it. Again, I can't speak for if the performance of the airplane at low speeds is realistic. Again, you could convince me that you know, it does have a lot of lift because it's got two big wings. I don't know. But dead simple, but challenging to fly well. It's a hands-on airplane, so you're constantly trimming and making small adjustments, and you need to actually kind of keep track of which fuel tank you're on, and on a real flight simming cruise, which is usually less than an hour, you will probably have to change fuel tanks a couple times, so don't get caught out by that. It's got good performance relative to other airplanes of the period. It's comparable to your modern piston engines, your Diamond DA62, your Bonanza, all that kind of stuff, your Mooney, or Just Flight Arrow. So you can actually go places in a reasonable amount of time if you're looking for those hour flights. It just expands the radius you can fly that much more. And it's just a good, fun cruising airplane. So if you're looking for something kind of simple, kind of hands-on, and the price is good, $15, you get it on sale even more. So I think it's definitely worth it at that. So it's a good, fun airplane. It's one I've been coming back to since I got it whenever it came out. So I've come back to it a few times and really liked it. Fairly unique. for a period piece, I like to say. So really cool plane, and yeah, looks great, sounds great, feels great. I really like it. If you're looking for an autopilot airplane, if you're looking for something to take on long trips, again, probably not the one for you. But I really like it for what it is, and a good cruising VFR trip around New York is something that this plane excels at. So that's it for why you should fly the Staggerwing. If you have any questions, comments, ideas for other episodes, drop them in the comments section below. As always, usual YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe. It really helps out the channel. I really appreciate everybody who has subscribed and watched our videos and liked and given your comments over the last few months. It's been really cool, really fun, and looking forward to a lot more. So, as always, it's been VFR. Take it easy, y'all. Really cool plane, and yeah, looks great, sounds great, feels great. I really like it. If you're looking for an autopilot airplane, if you're looking for something to take on long trips, again, probably not the one for you. But I really like it for what it is, and a good cruising VFR trip around New York is something that this plane excels at. So that's it for why you should fly the Staggerwing. If you have any questions, comments, ideas for other episodes, drop them in the comments section below. As always, usual YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe. It really helps out the channel. I really appreciate everybody who has subscribed and watched our videos and liked and given your comments over the last few months. It's been really cool, really fun, and looking forward to a lot more. So, as always, it's been VFR. Take it easy, y'all.